Hi, welcome to this episode of Integrate or Die. My name is Steve Hunt.
And I'm Jordan Katz.
So today we talked to Jenny Dearborn, who is a person that is both super knowledgeable in learning technology. She was a chief learning officer, she's a chief people officer, talent management officer, but really is focused on this idea of creating learning organizations. And so, Jordan, what were some of the things that you took away from this conversation?
Well, absolutely. I was interested in understanding analytics around learning and development experiences. How do we judge the efficacy of the courses or resources that we provide? And what actions should we take based on insights driven through the analysis of the impact of those experiences? And then maybe my favorite segment of all time on this show was why should you buy an LMS? Wrong answers only, where we heard all the reasons why you shouldn't say I'm getting an LMS. So really fun, really interesting. She's truly an expert, and I absolutely was so glad we got to talk to her.
Yeah, super dynamic. And a couple of things that I took also from Jenny. One was we asked her about learning technology, and she immediately said, we shouldn't focus on learning technology. She said, really, what's interesting is focusing on the reasons why we learn. And she gave sort of three things that she covered. She said, one, we learn because of the individual. So we need technology to understand what is it the individual needs to know or wants to know. And that's sort of like, skills assessment technology. And then she said, or we learn because there's some outcome we're trying to drive, whether that's sales or customer satisfaction, and back into that. Or maybe it's a certain task we need to perform, and then maybe there's a requirement or something like that. So she said, really, we're not starting with the learning technology. She almost downplayed it. She said
Yeah,
providing the
for
learning
sure.
part is the easiest part. The challenge is making sure you're providing the right learning that's going to have an impact on what you're trying to affect. That was a really
Yep.
good observation. She also raised a really interesting thing about the use of technology to enable people to learn through different job assignments and sort of internal talent mobility, and the need for executive courage. She's talked about how this technology that we have now that enables people to learn through assignments, she's seen it work phenomenally in some companies and fail miserably in others. And she
Mhm.
says it's entirely about the philosophy of leaders when it comes to managing for learning as opposed to just managing for productivity and efficiency. So with that, let's give a listen to Jenny. Jenny, welcome to Integrate or Die. Thanks for showing up. We start by telling you why we wanted you on the show, and you and I have worked together for quite a while over the years. And you are really, from my perspective, an expert on, well, learning in general, but also in learning technology. You've used lots of different kinds of learning technology, and you've also focused on technology to measure potential, because learning and potential are definitely tied together. So that's why I reached out to you on the show. But how would you describe yourself? How would you describe your kind of expertise when it comes to HR technology?
Yeah, I have been a chief learning officer 5 times, a chief talent officer twice, and a chief people officer 3 times. So I started in learning, but the reason why I'm excited to talk to you about today is learning didn't seem to make a difference unless it was integrated within all of talent, which is why I wanted to be a chief talent officer. And then talent felt like it really was not reaching its potential unless it was integrated with an all of people tech, and which is why I wanted to become a chief people officer, because in order for learning to work, it needs to be part of something bigger. In order for talent to work, it needs to be part of something bigger. And so I've sort of followed my career really aligning to the potential that I wanted to see from the technology that I was working with, and how the data flowed across the tech stack.
So, when you look at technology and learning, this is such a major, like in the book Talent Tectonics I wrote, I say one of the big changes is, accelerating rate of change. And people actually are wired for learning. That's what the competitive niche of humans is. We're born with that's one of the only things we know how to do innately is learn, eat, poop, and learn. But managing managing people to learn is very different. And there's technology. I think traditionally a lot of HR technology is focused on productivity, even learning. It's about how can we make training as quick as possible or as efficient as possible. How are you seeing technology enabling you as a learning professional to create learning organizations? What are the big technologies that are having an impact in moving us from productivity focus to learning focus?
How is learning technology driving that? You have the ability to edit this
Yeah.
video. I'm just
Yes,
realizing I need
we'll
to
fix
turn
it in
off.
post.
I need to turn off my. I need to turn off Outlook so that it doesn't make that beeping
Nice.
noise.
Okay. I will re-ask the question when you come back. So the
Oh,
question
that's
is,
a good idea.
Before you do, I want to think about it. How
Yeah.
does learning tech? What are other people saying? How does
Well,
learning technology
well,
driving? I mean, I don't want to be a Debbie Downer. I don't know that it does.
well, that's a great,
That's a
that's
great
great.
answer, and then
That's a
talk about
great
why.
answer.
Okay.
That's what we want to know. Feel free to be controversial.
'Cause-
It's
Okay.
very fun.
Yeah.
We haven't asked anybody about learning things like learning elements yet, so it's not you're blazing fresh ground.
Yeah. So
Okay. All right.
I'll do a pause so it's easy to edit back in. I'll ask the question again.
Okay, hold
So-
on. Let me get back into position.
Yeah. Everybody look. Wait, hold on.
All
Hold
right.
on.
Yeah, stretch it out. Stretch it out.
All right. Okay.
Okay, sorry. Okay, sorry. Be cool. Be cool. Everyone be cool.
So, Jenny, as a person that, as you say, has kind of gone from learning to talent to chief people officer, but the focus is really about how do we create more adaptable learning organizations and learning workforces. What do you see the technology doing? What are the critical technologies, or what critical role is technology playing in either enabling you to be successful in creating learning organizations, or maybe what are the technologies that are getting in the way?
Yeah. I would say that the traditional learning technology is not helping the organization become have a learning culture. All of the learning tech that I see is still very traditional. It is around delivering content in the fastest, most efficient way possible so that it really sticks in somebody's brain. But it's, it's mostly still a push. Every once in a while, you'll find something that is a pull. But I think the technology that is doing the most to create a learning culture is kind of the talent intelligence tech, or the internal talent mobility technology, or the assessment technology that says, you go in and you take some sort of assessment and deeply understand who you are as a learner, as a leader, as a person, how you show up in the workplace, what are your innate skills and capabilities and strengths. And then from there, be able to navigate where do you want to go next in your career, and then the learning that it takes to get from where you are now to your next job. But that's not learning technology. That is talent management technology or talent intelligence technology. And I have not seen yet, and I keep pitching this to people, who is integrating where learning comes after talent management technology, and that learning is then the step in between this job and that job, or I see that job 4 steps away. What is the learning I need to do to get there? That hasn't been integrated yet. So the traditional learning tech is still catalogs. It's still, I have the biggest catalog, or I have the catalog that is the most engaging, or I have the catalog that is on your phone, or I have the catalog that is, some new generation of the MOOC kind of concept. But learning tech is still very content focused and not experience focused, and not aligned to internal mobility the way it should be. So it's a long answer to a short question. The answer is I haven't seen anything yet that it blows my mind, that I think is really next level.
Wow. Well, I think it's a couple of things that you touched on there. I think one is, and it reminds me when I first started my career, somebody asked, what's the, seeks just career development. And he said, figure out what you want to do and then find someone to pay you to do it. And he said, the figuring out what you want to do, what you want to learn, what you want to become is much harder than
Oh,
the
yeah.
second part. And
Absolutely.
so you kind of touched on two things. One, technology that enables people to better understand, what do I want to learn to do? Where do I want to go? What are my capabilities and talents? But the other one that you also talked about, talent mobility, which is not taking learning courses, but moving to different job assignments or different careers. So maybe we can talk about both of those a little bit, which is What do you see? We'll start with the talent intelligence. What are you seeing with the talent intelligence technology? Are you seeing anything? I mean, because companies have been doing assessment for a long time. That's not new. Are you seeing anything that is really cool or exciting, or is there still something you're like that we have a gap we need to get past the traditional talent assessment tools?
There are a couple out there that I like that are a sort of a thin assessment, something like Plum, which is an easy assessment, and then it based on your innate knowledge, skills, abilities, competencies, strengths, interests. Then it says, I recommend this job or that job. You have to go through and tag all of your jobs with different skills, and then it sort of recommends different career paths. I like that one because it's very light and thin and it is easy to integrate. Something like an eightfold is going to be very heavy and kind of a big octopus that wants to like take over everything. It's also very strong product, but it's not a light thin approach. It's gonna want to knock out other things. It's a kind of a rip and replace strategy as opposed to an add-on. Um, um, but I haven't seen anything yet that is a real integration between that kind of starts with the philosophy of talent management
Mhm.
and talent mobility, and then learning is the how you get there. The learning is the lily pads to kind of get across the pond, right? It's always been, and I still see it as very, very separate.
Yeah, I think that's interesting too, because like with talent assessments, I used to build assessments myself. It's like um they they always feel sort of standalone. They always feel like they're not really they're
Mhm.
powerful. I'm a big believer in them, but somehow I think at certain points, career. I mean, I don't know. Have you taken a talent assessment recently?
Me, yeah, lots. I take
Yeah.
so many. Um, um, a- and I think there's a risk with, I mean, Corn Ferry is wonderful as an
Mm.
example. And what you take that assessment and they map it against the database of like millions of assessments. And so they've
Mhm.
got a really great predictor to say, this is what was successful in the past. And so you are just a tiny little data point on a
Mhm.
long trajectory. And so
Mhm.
with such a huge data set, it takes a long time for for that line to curve, right?
Mhm.
If things are moving quickly, it's going to take a long time because you have such a huge average from
Mhm.
past data points. Um, so there's strength in that. It's like the old saying, no one ever got fired for specifying IBM. Like,
Yeah.
there's strength in something that is so constant from the past. But it lacks some agility moving forward. And I think it depends on your industry and the size of your company and things like that, like what you need from leaders and what you need from assessments. Um, my personal philosophy is never ask a question unless you know what you're going to do with the answer,
Right.
before you start. So if you're like, oh, we need an assessment, okay, whoa, why? What are you going to do with it? How is it going to, inform you? What insights are you expecting? If you were to get this data, what I'm going to send me in this direction, this data, this direction, this data, this direction. Like, have a plan before you ask the question.
I think that that's a really good observation. I think with with the assessment, the talent assessment parts, because when I look at talent assessments in general, they tend to be used for like staffing. They're used for a specific hiring decision, and then they're never used again. And I think on the
Yeah.
employee side too, at least certainly I feel this way. It's like I don't want to take an assessment if I don't want to tell somebody my personality if I don't know how they're going to use that data. It's kind of personal,
Yeah.
Um, so I think that's an interesting thing to look at. What we really need, it sounds like, on the talent assessment thing for learning is we need a stronger connection to take this because then it's going to be used to recommend jobs or to
Right.
recommend training. And what's going to make these assessments really powerful is not the assessment, because we've had those for a long time. It's the connection of these assessments to some action.
Yeah.
And
What does it inform?
what
Yeah.
does it inform? And so and you mentioned sort of two actions. One is the learning catalogs and like here, take these training. The other one was I think is really interesting is talent mobility, because I think that's what most people, a lot of research shows that, the best way to learn something is to get a job assignment that forces you to do what it is you're trying to learn to do. There's a right and wrong way to do that, but
Yeah.
are you seeing are you seeing that happen at all? Are you, because you mentioned like Eightfold, for example, and some of these skills ontology, talent marketplace tools, which are like all the, they're cool. They're all rage. There's a lot of them. Are you seeing those, though, as a learning professional, are you seeing those being successfully used to get people moving around and getting more talent mobility?
I have. Eightfold is successful in that. Something like a Gloat and a Fuel 50 are
Hmm.
also in that space. I've heard lots of people have really positive experiences there. I think with anything, it's how you implement it and how you integrate it with other systems and tools and the program and the philosophy that you put around it. It's
Mhm.
the executive courage that that you show as a leadership team to say, this is our philosophy and our approach. Um, with the right philosophy and approach, you almost can do it on spreadsheets.
Mhm.
It's really around the clarity of purpose and vision that you have as a leadership team, and then the right technology that enables that. So I've seen lots of stuff successful, and then I've seen the exact same tools implemented at other clients that I have, and it's just been a disaster because they didn't believe in the philosophy and they weren't aligned in the philosophy of what this tool was supposed to help them implement.
I
I have a
like.
question about that, if
Yeah.
you don't mind, Steve, which is, you talked about belief, which is important, but I find and I'm fiercely interested in analytics and data and things that build belief or add to belief. And in the world of learning and development, and less so in talent mobility because there's a lot of action going on that you can measure, but talent overall, what are some of the key analytics that you have gathered in the past that have been successful around learning and the efficacy and impact of adding learning and development experiences? Or is that a big gap? And what's your wish list for analytics? Like, I think we'd all like to hear a little bit more about, what types of data can we gather around that, and how do we leverage that to create action or belief or, buy-in?
Yeah. So my philosophy is you don't create a learning program unless you know upfront what business impact metric you're trying
Mm.
to change with that learning
Right.
intervention. So, my close rate isn't great for my sales reps. So I need to create negotiation training because my
Mm.
analysis says, deals fall out of the sales pipeline at the very last step because they're weak in
Yep.
that closing skill. So I give this particular learning intervention with this specific skill because I want to measure close rate for the population that goes through the training and the population that doesn't. And then I know that learning intervention is the differentiator that helps the close rate. And now I've got a higher, sales results. So
Hmm.
unless you can do that with whatever it is, I would recommend to my teams where I've been a chief learning officer, don't put the learning intervention in place
Yeah.
because you will only be frustrating people and wasting people's time and wasting the company's money and burning your own reputation.
Yeah.
Because you're the training person that said, go take this. And they were said, why? And you said, I don't know, just go do it. And then who knows? So with the right design, you can do that for everything. You say, oh, it's easy in sales. It's easiest in sales. It
Yeah.
is also possible in every other area,
Right.
engineering, finance, project management skills, meeting management skills, interpersonal communication skills, every, knowledge, skill, capability area in a corporation. You can design learning programs that measure the business impact of the whatever knowledge or skill or ability
Yeah.
that you're putting in place.
Yeah, and
Nice.
I want to give a shout out to your book, Data Driven. I know that you really get into that topic. It's a
Nice.
really great book that talks about the impact of learning, has some great stories. And I think it's interesting, Jen, as you're talking, that when you first started about learning, one thing you're saying is the problem with learning is that we really need to start with the individual as opposed to start with the content. And now you're saying, and the other point you're saying is, and when you do the content, you want to focus on the consequences of the content as opposed to the content by itself. Going
Yeah.
back to the executive courage on talent mobility, though, because talent mobility is such a powerful way to train people, is moving people around. And you're saying that if you don't have the executive courage, you can put in these new technologies, that in talent marketplaces and all this stuff, but it doesn't happen. How do you, and I heard an executive once, I was talking about a opportunity marketplace, talent marketplace, and this executive said, I'd never turn that on in my company. It would create absolute chaos. People are in roles to do very specific things, and we can't have them wandering around to different roles, which I understand. It's a good point. He goes,
Yeah.
if you want to do a different job, we still need somebody to do the job we hired you to do, right? And it's like, and these like manufacturing companies, they're like, we make stuff.
Is he assuming you can just click a button and all of a sudden, poof, you're in a new job? I
Well,
love that optimism.
but I think
Right.
it is, but there is, I think, a point about if you see employees and you encourage them to kind of pursue what they're interested in. One, when you go into a new assignment, you're not going to be as effective at it. We have to go up the learning curve. It does affect productivity. It is going to impact productivity.
Yeah.
And I think that's
Sure.
part of the executive. Well, maybe you can tell me this is right. Part of the executive courage is willing to put adaptability and learning ahead of productivity sometimes and say, we'll kind of sacrifice a little short term for long-term strength.
Yeah.
How have you seen companies being able to convince that? Because you said same technology works in one place, doesn't it? And the whole thing is about executive attitude. Is it possible to change executives' attitudes, and how do you change it?
Well, you set this up, and you said you were talking to a CEO who said, if I did that at my company, it would cause chaos, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's never going to work at that company as long as that CEO believes that. It's never going to work. So that CEO needs to bump his or her head and recognize that we have a declining birth rate, a declining population, an aging population, not enough humans to get all the work done that needs to get done, more jobs open than we have capable people to fill those jobs, that it is so much less expensive to take somebody who's super engaged and committed at your current job and train them to do something else than it is to go get that person from the outside. I mean, the CEO that says, oh, let's just get rid of so-and-so, even though they're whatever 50% of what we need, and let's go hire somebody from the outside. Eventually there is not going to be enough people on the outside. You have to take the people that you have to and make them better for what you need in the future. I remember a long time ago, when I'm my very first interview process at Hewlett Packard 1,000 years ago, and I so distinctly remember the interviewer saying, I want to, in telling me up front, I'm an interview for the job that you've applied for, but I also want to interview you as a good fit for the company, because it is our expectation that you will do this job for a while, for a few years, and then you're going to do something else. So I want to talk to you about what you would want to do next, and how are your skills going to fit for something, and how are you a culture fit for the whole company, because we expect people to move around. I mean, they literally said that to me in the interview process. I was dumbfounded. It was incredible. And I remember, and you guys are at SAP. So I remember when I was at SAP and we had what was it called? The fellowship program, where there was an expectation that people could move around. You could post a fellowship online and say, I need somebody, 5 hours a week to do this special project. And anybody at the company could say, oh, I've always been interested in working in marketing or the design team. I had people in my staff when I was there dedicated to this. And I had one guy that says, I've got 5 hours a week. I'd love to go take a, special project in marketing. And he was motivated to do that. It was great. He did all the design signage for Sapphire or something like that as a side project. And it was a fantastic experience for him, and he learned a lot.
Do you think the HP um, discussion interview that you had, do you think that perspective still exists? We want to talk to you now about about your future.
I haven't seen it. I haven't seen it in a really long time. I don't think people think that way. Um, I would I would love to say the best companies still do,
Hmm.
um, but I don't hear that anymore,
I
and
will
it's a
say,
shame.
I agree in large companies. I think I just joined Simpler from Qualtrics, and I hear a lot more of that. I think some of the newer, certainly at Simpler, I think it's a leadership mentality
Yeah,
that can spread from the top down. I've even heard, like, I wasn't sure if this person was going to be a fit, but they're so talented that we need to see what we can do.
yeah,
And I'm hopeful that that is spreading throughout sort of the tech community. It certainly should be widespread around HR tech, because we all know as HR and employee strategy practitioners that that's the right play, right?
yeah.
Talent, give great talent the opportunity to succeed, talk about outcomes, manage them towards outcomes, and very talented people will get there,
Yeah.
Yes,
right? And I've
yes,
always, in fact, when I was at Gallup, we had that conversation too at Gallup, which is like, we want to be the talent hoarders. And if we own all the talent, then our competitors can't compete, and our customers will be delighted and will do things that will change the world. So um, I'll
It's
get off my soapbox on
no,
hoarding and talent
it,
and excellence, but I think that's the play.
yeah,
it's really it's really interesting though. So looking at this because I think now that we have companies that one hand say that, but then they like get rid of tons of people. The companies
yeah.
that are the most embracing of moving people around also seem to be the companies that are the quickest to lay off like 10% of their workforce.
Yeah, I think that that comes from not understanding the capabilities and the skills of your humans. I
Hmm.
think
Hmm.
that when you see a big company, and I don't know the insides of a
Hmm.
lot of companies, but just Google's
Hmm.
in the news. So Google lays off some huge percentage. Um, my instinct is they don't really know the knowledge, skills, capabilities of those humans,
Hmm.
and they don't know what they could do. They don't know their strategic workforce plan as a company. This is where we're going in the future. This is what we're going to need. And the people that have these skills could fit these future state jobs. My instinct when I see a big company make a move like that is that they probably are kind of disorganized internally. I'm not saying this about
Yeah,
Google, but I'm just
I,
in
I
general.
Yeah.
I don't disagree. I think there's a forecasting misalignment, right? If you're having to lay off 15% of your workforce, like, something happened in your estimate for what would occur in the world, or you overhired and that was a different forecasting. I have a question that I bet is on the minds of lots of people, because many people, I maybe the majority of people have been in layoffs or lost the job or whatever. As the chief people officer, you probably were involved, but as the head of talent or head of learning, were you ever involved in the conversations about reductions in force?
Yeah,
Okay, so they did do
absolutely.
some
Yeah.
skills.
Sure, 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 100%. At bigger companies that are more thoughtful, sometimes smaller ones kind of like make little reactive, quick
Yep.
movements. But at bigger companies where I've been, the conversation is we're going to lay these, we need to make this reduction.
Mhm.
And these humans do this future state skill for some other thing. Steve, RJ, who
That's
used
hopeful.
to be at Chevron, and I remember he was head of people analytics. He just took a new CHRO gig, but
Oh.
um, um, I remember RJ telling me a story about an analysis that he ran when he led people analytics at Chevron, that they found out there was one particular group of 300 engineers. It's multiple hundreds of thousands of humans that work there. And these specific group of 300 engineers were the only ones in the company that had very, very specific skill set for some, petroleum, chemical, something, something, something. And they were investing in a well site that wasn't going to produce whatever, natural gas or something for 2 years out. But when it did, those specific group of humans were the only ones in the world that could take this, at the next step. So they were so far ahead in their thinking. We don't need these people now, and we're not going to need them for 2 years. But if we let them go, then we won't have them. And there's no one else in the world that's going to help us 18 months out. So let's figure out something else for them to do, so that, that's their long range planning. And it's impressive. It's really impressive to talk to companies that are that organized.
That's a great call out.
It's so kind of just coming back to what you shared earlier when you talking. We kind of started about learning technology, but we just moved to saying that before you talk about learning technology, which we tend to think is training technology, the things that really drive its value are either really understanding the individuals that you're trying to learn, their potential, their capabilities, their skills, like these engineers, or on the other hand, the outcomes that this learning would create, which, whether it's running a well or whatever, but focusing more on this sort of the two sides of learning, that we take individuals, we teach them to do something to achieve a result. We need to spend more focus on the individuals and the results, and then the learning will take care of it.
Yeah,
but I do
honestly, yeah.
Yeah, it's a really fascinating sort of way of thinking about it in terms of how we also think about the technology and why it does need to be integrated into these different areas. I do want to come back to a technology question. This is a person that's been in this area all the time, and you come into different companies and you probably have this experience. When you walk into a company from a learning technology perspective, is there a technology that you're like, it's been around for a long time, everyone should be using it, but you're still kind of amazed that some companies don't use it? Is there like any learning, like, come on, people, why don't you have this?
I would have said learning management system a couple years ago. I probably would have said that, but I don't know if that's the case anymore. It used to be you'd walk into so now I have clients and they say, oh my gosh, we don't have an LMS. And now I say, why do you think you need one? What are you trying to accomplish with it? Whereas 5 years ago, it was like, oh my God, you don't have one? That's terrible. Let's get this in right away.
What's the wrong answer to why do you think you need one?
Because everyone else has one, because I need to do reports, because the wrong answer is because I want to know how many hours of learning each of my employees consumes. I want to have a central place to track my level 1 evaluations. If we got a 4 out of 5 stars on this particular class, that's the wrong answer. I need to have a central place to for scheduling. That's the wrong answer.
There's so many wrong answers.
What would the right answer? Is there any right answer?
Maybe we shouldn't give the answer on the show. Stay tuned to next year when we reveal the right answer to that. No, please. What's the right answer?
What's the right answer? Is it what is the right answer for a company needing a learning management system? Why would you need one?
You're in a regulated industry,
okay,
and you need to report for safety.
Sure.
You need to report who has completed if for service calls. I'm an engineer and I'm trained on all of these products, and so I'm ready to go from tier 3 to tier 2 in the phone tree, and I can answer those calls. But there's more. There's more interesting ways to do it now. From a safety perspective, Steve, my husband's in the construction trade. So, there's guys on their job sites, and every helmet has a QR code that is unique to that individual human. And every morning, the superintendent can just quickly scan all the helmets, and he gets green light, green light, green light, green light. Okay, you guys, red light, go sit in your truck for a half an hour and complete this online course on your phone. And then you are good to go for the safety of this particular job site today, right? Because today you're
not certified on whatever you're doing, right?
Yeah, today, yesterday was whatever, the day before that was rebar, today is concrete pour. Boom, boom, boom. So, and that's that's a completely different platform than the LMS, right?
The
So
classic content management system that's just got everything.
yeah,
It's
That
like a
is,
workforce scheduling tool, I guess, or technology. What would that technology be called? I mean, that you just described, is that like a
it's like
scheduling
skills
technology?
governance, right?
it's
Skills?
Skills
skills.
governance.
It's
You just
skills.
signaled the evolution of this industry into something that is so much more rapid, real time, and
Yeah,
applicable practical, because you don't even need the superintendent to scan. You could walk through,
yeah,
open road tolling, and it
yeah.
hits all the QR codes or RFID chips and then
Right.
signals out to somebody,
Right.
this
I
is
think
what needs to happen. It's
yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, so I just remember the concept. I mean, I've been in the LMS space since the 90s, which is ridiculous. But the concept was always the HR team or the learning team or the business, know what you need. And we're going to control, and it's very a command and control, sort of a hub and spoke model, where we're going to tell the business, and you need to wait, the business, until we, the learning organization, creates something and deploys it to you. And it's just so much faster now. And it has to be distributed. It can't be, it has to be, a decentralized model where everyone is able to create the content and have it be so much more dynamic.
Yeah, and it comes back here talking about the traditional of taking learning and sending content out. But all of these examples you provide are the opposite, where you're looking at the things around learning. So earlier I said there's the individual, there's the outcome, but there's also the task. The example you just gave from your husband is, what is the task to be certification? And then based on that, go to the content. And there's so many ways you can get content through the integration that it's like you don't need a learning management system to to get content to people when they go and ask for it
Sure.
for whatever reasons. It's really fascinating. Um,
Fascinating.
are there well, it's funny because I was asking you what are things that everyone should have, and you said, well, one thing we don't all need is learning. Is there something everyone should have? Is there a technology that you're saying, hey, this is really powerful and I'm surprised everyone's not using it?
I would say some form of skills assessment, a light skills assessment, that, I mean, if your company is big enough
Mhm.
and you have a philosophy in your company of internal mobility, then I would love for folks to have some sort of light skills assessment that is not hard skills. It's, it's something that we would have called soft skills or human
Mhm.
skills, people skills, your communication skills, creativity, innovation, things like that. Something that is assessing human skills and recommending different job paths
Mhm.
for that. Yeah.
Sort of a self-discovery, going back to those career guidance things we took in high school, but there's value. People don't know what they don't know about themselves. I think that's
That's very
really,
true.
it's so what about the next it's funny, we've gone so far afield from my little agenda, which is great. This is good. This current innovations. Um, are there any, well, I'm going to jump to the wish list because we kind of talked about current innovations. The
Sure.
skill stuff you're
Yes.
talking about actually is a very recent innovation. It's amazing how fast these skills ontology and skills discovery solutions have gone from concept to very practical use.
Mhm.
Do you guys see a skills inventory or that is wonderful? What is the company that you've seen that is really, because everybody's talking about skills and tying skills to jobs, and I just don't see anybody that's doing it really, really well.
I have to like be careful in my answers to these sorts of things because I love
Oh,
all my children.
got it.
Let me say something that I found very interesting recently. And, I was reading a report from Sky Hive, and it wasn't about so much skills ontology as leveraging skills and understanding people and their jobs as a way to predict macroeconomic future interactions. So, like, is there going to be a recession based on the level of skills and skills increase and that people are obtaining throughout their jobs? And so I like the idea. Sorry?
Recession. They can predict an economic recession based on skills.
I think we shall see, right? But they're at least attempting to
Huh.
leverage a aggregate analysis of what's going on in the skills of the workforce, um, to see what impact that will have. I mean, it
Yeah.
it it brought in many different factors to
That's
control for
firmograph.
just skilling, but yeah, it
That's
was very
firmograph. Yeah.
interesting.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm
Yeah.
starting to see things like I've definitely seen at a micro level, like I've heard like CEOs of manufacturing companies saying we can't open a factory in this place because the people don't have the skills to do it. So
Right.
it's having goes back to what you were saying, Jenny, earlier about companies need to realize that the demographic shifts that are happening, you can't just get the talent you need, which is why learning is becoming so important. To your point about skills, I have seen there's a lot of them, that these tools, and that I am seeing companies getting much better at understanding what are the skills people have, what do they know that they did. They're sort of being surprised. Now, I think what the point is, though, that the companies that are getting the most success from using them, there's a lot of work to put them in place. It's not like you
Oh
turn on
yeah.
this magic machine learning thing and it does it. There is a tremendous amount of human intelligence. And I think why they learn so much is that the technology creates enough automation to inspire them to actually do something they probably should have done anyhow, which is
Yeah.
understand the skills of their people. Um, but it's not just purely technology. It's technology combined with, like what you said, executive courage, or let's take skills seriously. So it's a
Yeah.
kind of those two together.
Yeah. And without the technology, I mean, the technology is the forcing function for
Mhm.
the humans to do the hard work. And without that forcing function, if the humans did the hard work, there would be no place for that, the outcome of that work to sit. Like it's not going to sit in a spreadsheet. Right? It needs to sit in a
Yeah.
dynamic system.
Yeah, exactly. Having built skills ontologies and spreadsheets and stuff before, it's like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's a waste of time. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's very depressing. What, kind of on the last question on a wish list, and you've kind of hit on some things, but if there was like a technology, as like you're saying, boy, I wish somebody would build a technology that would do this. What would be your wish list of the?
So I know you want to talk about learning.
Well, it can be whatever. You can
So
feel free.
putting my broader chief people officer hat on, um, the most challenging thing in people tech, well, the most challenging thing in the HR space is employee relations, and really good quality HR business partners. There is such a huge variety in HRBPs. And some are consultative and philosophical, some are business driven, some are great at confidentiality, some are not. I mean, it's all over the place. And it's um, managers are uh, getting less good.
Mhm.
We have not great managers in the world. And we don't have great management development programs the way we used to have. All I read are things that say, I don't want to become a manager because there's so much risk and the money is not significantly better. Um, and so people are choosing not to go down that path. And any compliance training that you listen to, it'll say, ask your manager. Your manager will help
Yep.
you. Manager will help you. And the manager's like, I don't want to get in the middle of this. So I think really great people tech that needs to happen is how to create a support system, an AI automated something that is
Mhm.
employee relations, compliance, advice, your best manager that you ever talk to that gives you wisdom and coaching, and some sort of bot or support,
Yeah.
that is all of that wonderful soft human stuff,
Mhm.
um, that a great HRBP would coach you on, or a great manager would coach you on.
I
And
think
I have a great stat for this. It's a great and horrible stat, which is, obviously we talk about people leaving managers. 57% of employees left companies because of their managers was one of the several studies that came out. But part of the issue is managers are unsupported. 70% of managers report that they've had no formal training on how to lead a hybrid team. And the hybrid teams are the majority of teams right now. So you've got managers that may or may not, my least favorite unforced error in the world is where you take a great individual contributor and promote them to be a manager, because the downstream effects of that are just, again, horrifying. But then you give them no support. You have to go do this job. You have no idea what's going on. 70% of those people that you put in this role have received no formal training. That's too many, right?
Yeah.
That is too
I-
much.
I often say, I hate that when people say, oh, employees don't quit companies, they quit managers. I'm like, no, they quit companies that put managers in roles
Yeah.
without supporting the managers or tolerating bad management.
Yes.
It's,
Right.
Yes.
and it's your point about having technology that supports managers, but also I think it's interesting too that, there's been this downplaying we should get rid of business partners and HR BPs. Well, you hear there's a lot of companies that are trying to save costs by reducing I've seen many an HR technology ROI that involves eliminating HR headcount.
Oy.
And I would say, to your point, we also need to be realistic about there's a certain point where managers shouldn't be expected to do certain things. Let's enable HR business
Yeah.
partners to be better at what they're doing to support those managers. So I think that's a really interesting observation. I've never seen technology that's designed to help HR business partners be better coaches. There's a lot of stuff to help
Yeah.
the administrative, but not that coaching supportive part.
And I wonder if there's a connection to learning, bringing it
Mhm.
home again. When we were coming up in our careers, there wasn't all sorts of amazing learning technology to support us, but we had great managers who sat down with us and said, what are you doing now in your job? What job do you want? This was a conversation, not a tool. What job do you want to do next? Okay, well, that job needs these skills. The current job you have these skills. I think the delta for you are these 4 things. So therefore, go to the catalog, the company catalog, and take these classes. And that's your learning development plan for the year. And that'll help. And then we'll check in, and then we'll, and I'll help you get to that next job, right? That was a human intervention from a good manager. Now we don't have good managers. So now we need all this technology to do the work that the manager used to do. Who are you now? Where do you want to go next? What skills do you have? What skills do you need? What's the delta? Let's make a plan. That's all automated away. And so there's this, conundrum. Do we train managers to do that work, or do we just put in a tool to outsource the human element of that management relationship?
I feel like back in the day that you're talking about, those managers and most companies had formal manager training.
Right.
And of course, a lot of it involved being in an actual classroom setting, but it certainly had an outcome in which we had managers who were much more focused on the career development of each individual employee or employee groups, rather than just pushing it off to a tech that
It
is less personal.
went back and not losing that part of the human part of that. It's like the human needs to be involved, whether that's a manager or an HR business partner or somehow looking at that. I think it's really interesting. Again, sort of integrating the technology with the human side. Well, we have time for our one last question I'm going to ask Jenny, which is, what is the question we should be asking? We've asked you a lot of questions, but what's the question about the future of HR technology that we should be asking? And then the caveat is you're going to have to then answer it.
I would love HR tech vendors, suppliers, whatever, to be able to explain the big picture and explain my puzzle piece, fits into the employee life cycle here, right? The employee life cycle, employer branding, talent attraction, talent acquisition, onboarding, goals, succession, exit. This is the world, and here's how I fit into the world. And I don't see any vendor or tech saying, here's how I integrate with your tech stack, or your employee experience. They're super narrow in their pitch. So your question was, what tech do we need? I don't know that we need anything new. My wish for everybody in this space is to understand how they play with everybody else. And what you need at every step of the talent experience, and what value do you bring, and how do you play with others?
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I remember I did a thing with a bunch of startups once, and I was looking at their marketing. I said, tell me what you don't do, because that would take less time than you have on your marketing site, because it was just like, we increase engagement and adaptability and blah 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 blah. And then you actually find out what their technology does, and they're like, yeah, we automate this one form. You're like, okay, you just started.
Oh, I know the answer.
Yeah, nice.
I know my wish for is that every whatever HR tech vendor clearly creates a component of my HR dashboard, of my metrics dashboard.
Oh,
as
there
a
you
chief
go.
people officer, I present my metrics dashboard to the board of directors once a quarter, to the comp committee, and present it in QBRs.
Nice.
And I have, my 10 or 15 key metrics. And if every vendor could say, my software solution or my puzzle piece impacts that metric or this metric.
Yep.
And if they started from my point of view and worked backwards, my point of view is, what is my metrics deck? And what is my tech stack, and how does my tech stack align to my deliverables that I have to share to the board of directors?
Which are usually about.
If vendors can help make that connection, that would be amazing.
Which ties it back to outcomes usually. Well, with that, Jenny, thank you so much for putting an integrator die. Great observations. I knew you were going to give us ideas we never thought of, which is so cool. And look forward to chatting with you more and just seeing you out in the field. So thank you.
I'll see you at the next conference.
Jenny.
Thanks, guys.
Good to see you.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.